Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
Thanks, Alex. And again, Alex will be back really not that long from now. But right now we go to investigative journalist, really a muckraker, Wayne Madsen. Thanks for joining us, Wayne.
Hi, good to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So first off, we have the news. We have the confession of the rebel who says he killed Gaddafi. We have Hillary Clinton saying it was the work of ordinary Libyans who ousted Gaddafi. And now we have the implementation of Sharia law, Wayne. What's going on in Libya?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the extension of a strategy of tensions. What the net result of this change of government, which let's call it for what it is, it's a coup d'etat, will be civil war. Libya is a nation of tribes. I have now found out, and I'm writing this story right now, but I'll give you a heads up on it. On October 19th at 8 o'clock, between 60 and 70 cars left Sirte. There were reports of white flags all around Sirte, also white flags on these vehicles. 8 o'clock, the sun's up. The white flag is internationally recognized as a flag of truce or a flag of surrender or a flag to negotiate surrender terms. You're not supposed to fire any weapons if you're behind a white flag, and the convoy did not. This was the convoy carrying Qaddafi. When it was 2 miles west of Sirte, after a Predator CIA drone had spotted the convoy, some French planes came in and started firing at the convoy. Other NATO planes came in successive waves. Many of the people were incinerated, drivers, passengers. Others were cut in half by machine gun fire. There are now reports of many members of the Qaddafi tribe. That is the Qaddafi tribe that lives in Sirte. Scores of people being found in mass graves. The Qaddafi tribal elder who was negotiating a possible surrender last month, back in September, his home was entered by rebels and he was shot to death. So here we have a possible war crime committed by NATO. And just to give you an idea how long the white flag of surrender and truce has been recognized, although it's recognized in the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907, the use of the white flag goes back to the Eastern Han Chinese dynasty of 25 AD. It was recognized by the Roman Empire and every major and minor army since probably October 19th, when the barbaric forces of NATO may have violated the white flag of truce, the white flag of surrender by Gaddafi's convoy, and set upon that convoy. And, of course, we know that Gaddafi was shot in the head by one of the rebels, and that in itself would be a violation of international law. But when we hear Washington and London and Brussels, NATO headquarters, trying and the rebel leadership saying, well, we'll investigate. The big story is here, not so much the extrajudicial execution of Moammar Gaddafi, but the fact that NATO, for the first time since 25 AD, violated in a major way the white flag of truce, the white flag of surrender.
And what do we know about Hillary's role? Her trip overlapped in Libya with his death, and she kind of joked about it on air and said, we came, we saw he died, and then said, no, we didn't have a role. Well, we probably did have a role in it.
Well, I think this just shows that Hillary, like Barack Obama, they base and the last administration, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, these individuals seem to revel in the macabre. Maybe it's the timing a few weeks before Halloween is good, because what we have is a ghoulish bunch of leaders who, it's sort of like some sort of pornography. Now there's a video circulating showing that Gaddafi was being sodomized by a rifle barrel before he was killed. Now this brings up remember Abu Ghraib, the sodomizing of the detainees there, the executions of detainees at Abu Ghraib, and all the other heinous war crimes committed by the United States and its allies. And here we have what seems to be a continuation of this policy. I have to wonder what kind of people are in our CIA and military that would countenance this type of sadomasochistic, bizarre, pornographic death cult, which, I mean, we know that bin Laden was codenamed Geronimo, and, that brings up the whole story about Geronimo's skull being stolen from Fort Sill by Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and spirited away to the Skull and Bones compound in Yale, at Yale University. It just goes to show, I think, that we are a pretty depraved country and have pretty depraved leaders and pretty depraved people in the military that goes along with this type of thing. But to ignore the white flag of surrender, the white flag of truce, I think is a major, major war crime, and one that NATO will try to cover up with all of its resources, because everyone recognizes that is way beyond the pale when it comes to a war crime, failing to recognize the white flag of truce.
But then we have, even before they can launch the supposed burial at sea we're told about, we have the talking point coming out that Syria's next. The CNN headline, Syria, Yemen, opposition warned dictators, you're next. McCain's talking about military options in Syria. You have people like Senator, that other senator who says that Assad's basically next. What's going on with that, Wayne Madsen?
Well, we had McCain not only talking about if he were Assad, he'd be, if he were Assad, he'd be nervous. He also added Vladimir Putin, who will be the next president of Russia, and the leadership of China. It's clear that John McCain is insane. They don't call him Insane McCain here in this city for nothing, but it's quite clear that, this guy has no business opening his mouth, because he's basically a mental patient, and he's talking about, and I do believe that the CIA now was involved in allowing Qaddafi to be executed, but is he suggesting that it's open season on Assad and then Putin and whoever is going to be the future leadership of China, Hu Jintao and his successors? This is irrational, dangerous talk, and it should not be allowed. And we didn't hear anything from Hillary Clinton or the White House condemning McCain's remarks, and I have to assume that they pretty much agree with McCain, or at least allow him to go out there and make these irresponsible statements, because the United States has designs. Today it's Tripoli. What are they saying? Tomorrow there'll be U.S. Tanks and troops in Damascus and Moscow and then in Beijing. I don't think so. L.A., Washington, and New York will be a heaping pile of radioactive rubble before that happens.
Yeah, but it's queued up without even missing a beat, as if it's a symphony orchestrated completely. I mean, what's really going on with this Arab Spring?
Well, the Arab Spring, I think, I maintain that the Arab Spring started for economic reasons. I mean, remember Tip O'Neill said all politics is local. And when you see the price of bread and other staples go sky high, what happened in Cairo and Tunis was really very similar to what was happening in Athens and Madrid and Rome. Because Tunisia and Egypt were dictatorships, they didn't have that, safety valve to let off the steam as they did in Greece and Italy. Although the police, let's face it, have been pretty brutal in both Italy and Greece. But in Egypt and Tunisia, they didn't have it. So what turned out to be a popular uprising, of course, Soros and his gang of NGOs tried to glom onto it by using the Twitters and the Facebooks to try to engineer one of these themed revolutions. But what happened there was it was the entire population that rose up. People who didn't know what Facebook was and never used Twitter. They may have had cell phones, but they certainly weren't these, Twitter people. But they hit the streets and forced the governments out. And so things got out of control. So now in Egypt, you have the rise of the Muslim Brotherhood. In Tunisia, there's an Islamist party that's done quite well, apparently, in the elections held yesterday. But even that party aligns itself more to the Turkish Islamist party, which is not radical by any stretch. It's actually very pro-business and pro-democracy. But be that as it may, I think the fact is that the Arab Spring it did not have the intention of some of the globalists thought it would have.
Okay, Wayne Madsen, we will be back on the other side of this break with more on what's happening in the Middle East as well as what's happening financially in Europe and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. This is The Alex Jones Show. Aaron Dyke sitting in. Alex Jones back again next hour. Stay tuned. We are back with investigative journalist Wayne Madsen talking about what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on financially. Alex will be back on the other side of this break. But Wayne, right now I want to get into some of the stuff that's happening in Europe. The London Telegraph headline, New Euro Empire Plot by Brussels for a Single Treasury. You also have the Vatican coming out today calling for a world central bank. What do you see on that front, sir?
Well, anytime I hear anything coming out of the Vatican, I think of the immortal words of Joseph Stalin at the Yalta Conference, where it's FDR, Churchill, and Stalin sitting around, and they're dividing up Europe after the war. And Churchill pipes up and says something. Well, what about the Pope? And Stalin says, how many divisions does he have? Who cares what the Vatican thinks? I mean, they got 50 Swiss guards, and that's their military force, and they're enmeshed in scandals with pedophilia in almost every country. They have a presence, so I wouldn't put any stock in anything the Vatican says. I mean, it's they use a dead language, Latin, and pretty much I think their influence is much overstated. But as far as the euro is concerned, we now have this food fight that broke out apparently between Nicolas Sarkozy, the French president, and David Cameron, the British prime minister. Now, Britain's not a member of the Eurozone. It doesn't use the euro, but Sarkozy apparently told Cameron, mind your own business. You're not in the Eurozone. I think what we're seeing happening here is it's the collapse of the euro. They'll try every which way to try to preserve this, but we already know that the Germans are printing up the Deutschmark and have every intention of bringing back the Deutschmark. And once that happens, you'll have a two-tier system. Other countries in Europe will either peg their currencies to the D-mark, the new D-mark, or they will be using this very much deflated euro, which this will be the situation, of course, in countries like Italy and Spain and Greece. Even in Greece, we see a move to bring back the drachma. The problem with Greece is it's broke, so what would the drachma be worth if it was brought back? It would be a totally deflated currency, and it would be the situation you had in Weimar Germany before World War II. It'd probably take millions and millions of drachma to buy one loaf of bread. So what I see happening in Europe is what's eventually going to happen in the United States, only you've got the problem with these rising nationalism amongst the EU members, so you get into the food fight between Sarkozy and Cameron. Let's face it, the French and the British have never liked one another, and the EU or anything else isn't going to change that fact.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have Van Rompuy trying to seize greater power on the back of this wider economic crisis, Wayne.
Right. Now, here's another interesting case. Van Rompuy, a Belgian. Belgium itself is a collapsing country. Belgium hasn't had a workable government in well over a year, almost 2 years, I think. And so what is Belgium? It's Brussels where you've got NATO and the EU headquartered. The rest of Belgium is split between Flanders, which wants to become independent as a republic, ditching the ties to the Belgian monarchy, and Wallonia, which intends to hook up with France. So Belgium itself, the headquarters for the EU, is a dying country. It's going to split apart.